everyone. My name is Pamela Pitcher, and welcome to my podcast, Awaken to the Best You. This podcast is designed to inspire and propel you to a newfound level of empowerment and clarity. Through cultivating the art of thinking, you'll learn how to detangle your thought knots and train your brain to break through obstacles. You'll learn to focus on what matters most and make effective choices to become a remarkable you. Today, I am pleased to introduce you to Daniel Ireland. Daniel is the co-founder of AwareFul, along with his spouse, Donna. They recently relocated from Jersey in the UK, where I live, to the Gold Coast in Australia. A native Australian, Dan has gone back home. In Jersey, our paths never crossed. It wasn't until one of his colleagues at AwareFul Jersey asked me to participate in an online well-being weekend this past June did I have the opportunity to work with Daniel. When I read his story on his website, I knew I wanted him to be a guest on Awaken to the Best You. Daniel is a mindfulness meditation teacher, psychotherapist, emotional intelligence lead, and a Tibetan Buddhist. He speaks plainly about his journey through depression while providing insights into the mindset and methodologies that got him through. What he says will be of help to you even if you've never struggled with depression. His message, like mine, we need to train our brain to live a life of positivity. It's my loss that I didn't meet Daniel while we lived in the same space because he's a man worth knowing. I give you Daniel Ireland. Welcome, Daniel Ireland, and thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. So you are the founder of AwareFul, located on the Gold Coast in Australia. And reading your website, I see that you're a psychotherapist, a sports therapist, an international mindfulness teacher, an emotional intelligence coach, a breathworks teacher, and a Tibetan Buddhist. That's a lot. So how would you describe your practice?
I guess, if anything, I would say I'm a mental health coach, or a mental health practitioner, and all those different sort of arms of what I offer sort of all work towards making people's lives a little simpler and happier.
So what does a typical client look like, or do you attract different personalities depending upon the course or the coaching that you're offering at the time?
Yeah, incredibly diverse. It used to be women between the ages of 35 and 55 used to sort of be the ones that I worked mainly with. But now my demographic is all over the place, and seeing people that are sort of suicidal, or maybe they're struggling with redundancy or restructure or broken relationship or abuse, to feeling down today or a little bit stressed about a test coming up, or people just wanting some help to understand how to manage their emotions a bit better. So about resilience building, or understanding about working that compassionate muscle a little bit harder. I suppose I don't really market myself well enough to really pigeonhole myself into anything.
I think that's a good thing based on everything that you're helping people with. So why pigeonhole yourself when you can help in such a broad way? You're offering courses for men now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things, I guess, being a bloke, and I absolutely loved all the ladies that used to come on the course, but it was always sort of almost 100% women and 0% blokes, and I know, being a bloke myself, and looking at the sort of mental health stats and suicide rates and all the rest of it, that we need the support as much as anyone else would. And sometimes we're just too brave, too stubborn, too pig-headed to reach out. And so I really wanted to sort of create that olive branch and give them something that isn't what I'm learning, a new word over here, which is woo-woo. And apparently that means it's all a bit woo. They expect to sort of come in and be saged and me dragging through my robe and whatnot, but they realise it's just a normal bloke wanting to help, show you some tools for your toolbox to when life takes a dip, you've got something to call upon to begin to sort of, I use the word like the reservoir, and when the reservoir's dry, it's no wonder we get exhausted so quickly with stress and anxiety because we've got no way of topping it up. The tools are all about topping up that reservoir, and every time we sort of have a bit of a dip in life, we've got something there that we can call upon to keep quenching our thirst, I suppose you could say. Pardon all the puns.
It's good. It's good. I'm one of many women who have trouble getting their husband to go to the doctor and other practitioners. So it's really good to hear that men are finding their way to you. And I bet they are relieved that they're finding practical tools to work with as opposed to some esoteric concepts. Would that be
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%. The last time I was back in Jersey, I did a course around, more advanced practices of meditation, and the split was 50-50. It's definitely becoming more mainstream, certainly on the bloke side of things. I think blokes are beginning to realize actually I can open up without someone putting me down or making me feel ashamed of having a mental health condition. And also, I think they're beginning to realize actually a lot of the stuff that they're being told is simple, not just feminine, like I remember yoga and Pilates and stuff being pretty much all ladies as well. But then blokes have begun to realize actually I need to strengthen my core and I need to start to learn how to be a bit more flexible and start using my mind through yoga practices too. And it's now beginning to sort of spread even further into meditation. So it's good. It's good to see that there has been, or is really beginning to see that shift, because as blokes, we're never really taught how to be a bloke, but yet show our emotions. A lot of us are sort of taught to man up and to just get on with things, when sometimes that works, but most of the time it doesn't. And what ends up happening is when it does work, we end up creating like unhelpful habits, So maybe we've had a bad day, so we'll have a drink, or we've had a bad day, so we'll work a bit harder, or we have a bad day, so we take recreational drugs or whatever it is. And sure, that'll probably help for a little while, just to at least distract you from the pain that you're feeling. But ultimately, it just ends up catching up with you. It's awesome to see blokes are starting to sort of stand up and say, and over here in Australia, it's like a tsunami of men's stuff. I know obviously my algorithm on my social media is all about mindfulness stuff, but it's wonderful to see. It's incredibly inspiring, some of the stuff people are doing.
That's wonderful. So is mindfulness the key tool that you're using with your male audience?
Yeah, mindfulness, emotional intelligence. I sort of weave emotional intelligence in, because if you say emotional intelligence to a bloke,
They run away? No.
so I'll use it, mental health and things like that, positive mental health strategies, because it is exactly what it is. It's just packaged in a way that makes it more accessible for the male side of things.
Well, good for you for doing that. So your background is fascinating to me. Now, you've studied Buddhism with Mingyur Rinpoche and Reggie Ray.
Mhm.
What can you tell us about their particular brand of Buddhism? Because the little I read about it in researching for this podcast, it was very refreshing.
Yeah, it is. They call it, or what I've been told it's called, is called arm's length teaching, which means we give you the stuff, you go off and practice it, and if you get stuck, come back to us. So originally, I studied under Dharma Ocean and Reggie Ray under the Kagyu lineage, and I loved it. Incredibly spiritual, not from sort of, again, the sort of woo-woo spiritual side, but incredibly sort of intuitive, where it's a real exploration. I remember being on a course and Reggie Ray told me, and this was when I was struggling with depression at the time, depression is workable. And I remember looking at him thinking, you've obviously got no idea whatsoever about what depression's about. But what I began to find actually through the practice is that depression is absolutely workable, and that for the down, the yin and the yang of life is the recognition that without the down, there's no up, and without the up, there's no down. And rather than sort of fighting this disease, I've got to notice it and work with it and nurture it rather than abuse it and shamefully put myself down about having these horrible negative thoughts. And where the Buddhist side came into it. And I didn't become a Tibetan Buddhist for at least sort of a year and a half because I just wanted to understand about it. It was another one of his courses, somatic body courses, and it was just really beginning to strike a nerve with me in terms of, self-management, self-understanding. And for you to be able to take it on to the next level, you had to go and take refuge. And me not seeing religion as being anything other than, I guess, for what it is, just a way of living for different types of people. I wanted to understand Buddhism because it was a way of managing my brain and my emotions. And so went and took refuge with Dharma Ocean. They gave me a Tibetan Buddhist name or some sort of name.
Can I ask what the name is?
Yeah. So, yeah, sure. You're the first person to actually ask me that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, good for me.
My wife knows what it's called.
Okay.
It's Dharma Sky Dancer, or the sky dancing side is really around sort of the feminine side of it all. And a lot of the female deities were considered, I've forgotten their name, but one of them in particular was all about sort of dancing in the sky and the spiritualness of it, sort of bringing through the intuition from the past learned scholars and meditation gurus and all the rest of it, and bringing that to life.
As you say the name, I just described it. I'm just sort of getting a lighter side to life.
Yeah.
You've struggled with anxiety and depression. Perhaps that was part of it, is to bring that balance of light and joy to you as well. Because they put a lot of meaning into names, don't they?
Yeah, well, you have to complete a whole, not exam, but I guess a bunch of questions around, because they want to know why you want to do it, and if they don't feel like as if it's a good thing for both you and them, from what I understand, that they've sort of said to people, look, why not just keep going with the courses? The first question is, why would you ever want to become a Buddhist? And I remember my answer was, when you sort of see a door and the door's shut, but there's something beyond the door, and all you can see is the light that sort of shines out from underneath. I said, that for me is Buddhism, the light shining out, and I just want to see what's behind the door. And that's what it was for me, when all of a sudden you feel like you're back in control of your brain again. And don't get me wrong, I've competed at the highest level in sport. I've competed for Australia, and I was in my peak physical fitness, but not even training 14 times a week could stop my brain from doing or delving into the depth that it went to. So, and I could never get my head around, why I could cut myself and in my body would heal, but my brain doesn't heal. And it used to baffle me until I found Buddhism, and it showed me how to heal my brain, basically. So I'm incredibly grateful to both Reggie for getting me into it, and Mingyur Rinpoche and all the people at Tagar that continue to inspire me every day with their wonderful talks and workshops and stuff, and would recommend, even if you're not looking to get directly into becoming a Buddhist, Buddhism isn't particularly for Buddhists. Buddhism is for everyone. I know I've met, bishops, what do you call the people with the white collars in churches? Christian and Catholic church, they're in studying as well. One of the courses I went on to, he was the head of sort of like a country of the Catholics. He was like the top boy for one country in Europe. And we begin to recognize that actually this Buddhism isn't a religion. It's not completely non-secular. It's accessible to everyone. Yes, they've got chanting and prayers and prostrations and things like that, but that's not the long and short of it. There's a lot more to it than that side.
Buddhism is a philosophy, isn't it? And all the chanting and prayers are tools, again, to go within and tune to your soul, if you will, or your unconscious mind even. And that's where you do gain control and discipline over your mind. It's very interesting that you said, you were so disciplined as an athlete, but you couldn't get the discipline on your brain, but you found a way, and I'm sure the athlete in you persevered to find it. So you're inside and out, you're training your body and training your brain And I often call myself a trainer for the brain. It's kind of like going to the gym and doing sit-ups when you do certain meditations, mindfulness, and use different mind tools, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So you've struggled with anxiety and depression, as so many people in the world. Is it safe to say then that Buddhism is the chief way, your chief, I hate to say tool because it's so much more than that, but was it the path that changed things for you, and the
100%.
depression melted away from there? And sorry, you said 100%.
It helped create some foundations that I didn't have. And within those foundations, I began to understand the nature of my own mind and find that happy place again. As much
Yeah.
as it sounds like one of those cheesy sayings, it was finding that happy place again.
Well, it's getting control of that little voice in your head, isn't it, really? That just go babbles away all day long. So
Yeah.
it's very inspirational, your story. Can you talk about when you first had depression and kind of the route you went, and how you found your way to Buddhism and mindfulness? Just as a living example of somebody who's out there, that just knowing that you can change your life through going inside.
Yeah. And I guess I think it would have started at school. I was a very sporty person in an academic school. I didn't have a great deal of friends, was bullied a lot of the time by both teachers and students, particularly the teachers. And I didn't realize just how much of an impact things like that would have on me, like being made to stand in the middle of a garbage bin, in the middle of an oval, or cleaning up everyone's mess after lunch just because the principal didn't like me playing sport for a team outside of the school. Yeah, I didn't
Well,
realize maybe how much of an impact that made on my mentality. And then I had sprint kayaking at the time, so I was kayaking and doing well, winning Australian championships and that, and state championships and that, and surf life saving and all the rest of it. And I guess I really taught myself how to win. And then when I went away and competed for Australia, my body fell apart. And I only weeks earlier had beaten the guy that ended up becoming the world champion. But my body broke, and there was a whole list of things that happened in the weeks upcoming. They changed my paddle, then my paddle broke, then the paddle broke again, and they changed my paddle again. And for someone that's paddled with the same paddle for 2 years, it's like trying to paddle a boat backwards, trying to learn a whole new different thing. And the psychologists, they taught you how to win and not how to lose. And when I came home from what I would classify as a heartbreaking world championships, I felt a failure, and not just a failure of myself. I felt like I'd let down my whole country. And that weight just began to sort of bear on top of me. And on top of that, I was having struggles focusing on university, because obviously when your mind's not on things, and a couple of relationships that didn't work out so good, and dabbling in recreational drugs and all the rest of it to try and hide the pain. And then I found myself sort of crying every morning until my dad eventually, after a couple of months, just said, "Look, I can't stand this anymore. Let's get you to the doctors and try and find out what's going on here." And they diagnosed me with chronic depression and acute anxiety disorder. And that was when I was late 19, early 20s, maybe. I'd say late 19. And then gave me a whole bunch of things like Xanax and whatnot, and told me just to take it, and didn't enjoy how that felt. So got a bit suicidal. Parents thought probably it would be best to leave Australia and go over to Jersey where my brother was. And I don't think he was prepared for the mess that was arriving. And they did their best. I know they did. I don't know how they put up with me for the several months that I was there. But it was when I sort of went for a job. I'm pretty sure it was Barclays, and on the job app it said, have you been diagnosed with depression? And I remember thinking, and this was under the criminal bit, I remember just thinking, there's no way I'm ticking that box. And I didn't. I got the job still. But what that told me was I need to hide this, I didn't really feel like telling anyone anyway, because it's pretty shameful that I'd sit at home and cry on my own most days, for a full-grown adult. It felt lot of shame and embarrassment. You had no control over your head. So I struggled with hiding it for years, focused on playing rugby union. It allowed me to get all of that anger and sadness out on 15 people for 80 minutes, totally legally, which was wonderful, just exerting all that anger and frustration on other humans. It was when I turned to Buddhism that I realised actually it was not the greatest way of venting, but at the time it was fantastic.
Sport is such a great outlet, isn't it, for getting rid of all sorts of negative emotion. It was one tool for you that worked, at least for that time on the field or the pitch.
Yeah, it definitely. I'd still feel down during the week. I felt after a game of rugby, it took me a couple of days and I'd feel good again, and then the fog would roll back in. It was odd.
Well, it's also wonderful that you had support from your parents and your brother during that time. So,
yeah, brothers, both of them were really good.
brothers. I met a reverend in California.
Reverend, that's
And
the word I was looking for.
Reverend, yeah. There's priests, there's bishops, there's reverends.
Okay, apologies.
There's all sorts.
Well, maybe it was a priest. I don't know. Apologies.
No worries. And she lived in Sonoma, California, and she was a very special woman. And I was having a session with her, and she said, Pam, because I was depressed at the time, and she said, Pam, your depression is your soul telling you you're off track. And that really hit home for me because I was trying to do things that weren't sitting really well with me. So would you agree with that statement that when we're depressed, that it is a message? It's you saying, hey, something's got to change here because this isn't working for you.
100%. What happens is we begin to sort of play all these characters that we think that everyone else wants us to play, and we actually begin to lose who we are and who we actually want to be. And it gets to the point where we don't want to play that character anymore, but we feel like we're in so deep into it that there's no way out, there's no escape, and it was Jim Carrey actually. I remember him saying when he was depressed that he sort of broke it down into sort of deep rest. And he said it was a deep rest from the character that you're wanting to, that whatever the character is that you're not wanting to be anymore. So you're wanting to sort of begin to sort of take yourself away from playing that role that you're no longer enjoying. It's no longer giving you the fulfillment. And don't get me wrong, trauma and things like that lead to depression and obviously different types of relationship breakdowns and stuff like that. But I think sometimes even within those, we begin to play this character that we expect other people expect us to play.
You wear a mask or different masks, don't we?
Yeah.
And tuck ourselves away. And I do think that the bullying you receive when you're younger at school is just horrific because that has a profound effect on us, especially you're bullied for doing well.
Yeah,
right?
and especially from teachers as well. That was the strange part,
Yeah, exactly. So, as just hearing that, definitely those teachers had issues. It was their stuff, not your stuff. And it's unfortunate that you had to go through that. So your journey from depression, though, it's such a course of action in like your life, your journey from depression to mental health practitioner, transformational coach, and therapist. So where does your passion for your work come from?
An absolute hunger to help people. If there's one thing that gets me down these days because of COVID is that I'm not being able to get out and help people as much as what I was, and that is it in a nutshell. I just want to find a way that I can make people happier or show them that there is something beyond what they believed that can make them happier, that we can begin to actually manifest the life that we want. We just need to start pointing our attention in the right way. We need to start becoming aware of the way we talk to ourselves, the way we judge ourselves, the way we criticize ourselves. And just like you so eloquently put, a lot of the baggage that we carry is not ours. A lot
Absolutely.
of the baggage that we carry is because other people have tried to. They've tried to do their best for you, but they never got the Pam handbook or the Dan handbook, so they're just impeaching on you or imposing on you. Sorry, I failed in English at school. I'll make up words as well as we go along. It's amazing.
Well, but you sound very proficient in Australian, so we'll forgive you for
Yeah,
that.
we use those types of words in Australia, but it's slightly different to the UK. So that they impose their thoughts and beliefs on you, thinking that that's what's best. And that's often where we start playing these characters, because we try and make other people happy. A culture of tribal, where the last thing we want to do is upset the tribe, So
I developed a rule ages ago, and it still serves me well, is that when somebody's criticizing me, I look at the person and I think, okay, do I respect you? Do you have your act together? And, do I trust you? Because often people that criticize us have all sorts of their own issues, right? And they're reflecting it back on us. So it is really important to be able to look at the person and say, do I accept what you're saying to me? And if I respect you and I trust you, then if you criticize me, I'm going to either learn something, or it's just, I know that you're helping me, right, to be a better person. But you don't know that when you're young, and
no,
teachers are the end all be all, right? And we listen to them.
yeah,
So
100%. And a lot of the voices that we have aren't ours. When we actually think about it, when we actually talk to ourselves that way, honestly, if we had a choice, a lot of the vocabulary that we use when we describe ourselves hasn't come from us. There's no
no,
way if we had a choice. If you had a choice as a child, like to tell ourselves that we're useless and pointless and no longer should be here, and all we do is make people sad, and all this stuff that we put ourselves down by, there's no way we would talk to ourselves like that, and a lot of that stuff, when we really start getting into sort of meditative practices, is a lot of forgiveness that we start doing, forgiving ourselves for beating ourselves up, and forgiving ourselves for letting all this sort of emotion carry us away. And there's a lot of warmth there, when we start really working with that sort of the compassionate heart that we have, because we are incredibly compassionate creatures. We've been designed to help all others before ourselves. We love helping others. We love it. We're just useless at directing some of that kindness back on ourselves, because we've never been shown. No one's ever told us how important we are.
that was a really interesting thing you said. What did you say? We're all created to help each other.
Yeah, we are compassionate creatures. We are socially connected. We have parts of our brain, the mirror neuron network, that is designed to be around and watch people and follow them and learn and connect. And it's that network, when you see someone walk into a tree and you see them bang their head, you'll let out a bit of a giggle, but you also sort of go, oh, and rub your forehead, because your body, even though you're not doing it, it mimics the pain that you're feeling, so you can connect with them. You begin to embody their pain, which I think is it's incredible. This is in our design.
So what advice would you give somebody struggling at this time? You'd mentioned COVID. The world is a little bit upside down at the moment. Is there any advice or tips that you would give somebody struggling at this time?
Yeah. Number one, reach out. To start talking to people. If you're struggling, don't feel ashamed. Don't think you've got to do it on your own. There's so many incredible services out there, and people that just want to help. And I would say, use this time wisely. Start working with your brain. It's this type of emotion that really, as a Buddhist, it's what you've been training for. This is the big event. This is the Olympics. It's when life gets pear-shaped and you really get to try out your practice and be able to work with those emotions, that when people are telling you can't see your family anymore, you got to stay at home, when you got to look after your kids, when you've no longer got a business, when you've got all these things, all these emotions, you no longer got your income, you've got all these things that just start coming up in your life. And you've been waiting for an opportunity to really test your mental resilience against it, because you can't when you're dealing with life every single day. So right now, I would say the best thing to do is start finding methods, start finding tools, start finding practices, teachers, whatever, and start looking at ways to better manage this mind that we have. Because I promise you, if we're just going to the gym, it's not enough. If you're just doing yoga, it's not enough. 1 in 4 people are going to struggle with mental health. That's the stats. And they're saying now that 1 in 3 are currently struggling with high states of anxiety, and they're the ones that are honest enough to go and seek support. Even if it's not just for you, if you're beginning to learn some stuff about how to manage it for yourself, you can impart some of that wonderful knowledge on others. Sometimes you don't have to just be struggling to start learning about these things. You can start learning to help build your reservoir for when life takes a dip in the future, because at some point people are going to die. At some point you probably lose your job. At some point something's going to hurt you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a wonderful story of the Buddha. A lady, she was seeking support from him after losing a child or a loved one. Obviously, there was more to it than just what his words were, but what came from his teaching was, if you could help me, what I'd like you to do is go out and get a mustard seed from every house in this village, because I want to make a sauce, or I want to make some mustard, or whatever it was. But he said, if you could go and get me a mustard seed, but only from those houses where they haven't had some sort of loss. And when she came back empty-handed.
That's a great story.
Yeah, we begin to recognize that actually this practice isn't just about us. This practice, it has wonderful side effects of making us relax. It makes us a bit happier, a bit more connected. It makes us more resilient when things go bad, but it helps people that are around you as well, because when you're less stressed and sleeping better and looking at life a bit more positively, the ripple effects of just you getting better at you is, if you multiply that by 1 billion, the world will be a totally different place, which is why I love, the Dalai Lama's quote. He says it all the time, what we need is an evolution of the heart. When we put as much emphasis in understanding how to love each other as we do how to segregate ourselves.
So we all learn by example. What you're saying is absolutely true and so powerful. Because we do learn by example, I'm just thinking about the practicalities of the work that you do. Can you share a client journey with us where a client transformed in such a way that could inspire our listeners with, and of course, not saying their names or who they are, but it would be, I think, really helpful.
Yeah, of course. One of my favorite stories is, there was a lady that turned up. I'll say lady, but it could be a lady or a man. I'm just going to use lady. Turned up at my class, and I ask everyone to complete one of these forms that sort of says, what are you struggling with? Have you got your doctor to say that everything was okay? And she, I guess, didn't complete her form correctly, shall we say. She lied on her form just to get into the class. And I found out after the second course that she was on that actually one of her children had been brutally and savagely murdered, because she was asking me lots of questions, and we were talking about compassion at this point in time, and she was saying how she would never feel compassion again, and that everything that she went through, she doesn't sleep, and an incredibly heartbreaking story. And we started to work a little closer together, and I invited her on every course that I went on just to come along and enjoy it and get involved and understand what it is about the practice. And maybe about a year later, of just working closely with managing her emotions, understanding, that forgiveness doesn't involve forgiving anyone else, it's forgiving ourselves, and starting to sort of work with this tidal wave of emotions that she felt completely overwhelmed with at the start, just through mindfulness and meditation and a lot of reframing, reframing a lot of stuff for her. She sent me an email just saying, how thankful she was, and that it's the first time in her life since it happened that she doesn't have nightmares and wakes up anxious every day and feels she's no longer on her depression tablets and all this sort of stuff, and she said she tried everything else, but it was actually living and breathing the practice and really listening to the guidance that's helped her in enjoying her life again. Things that have happened can't change. And this is what we had many discussions on via phone calls and emails. We can't change these things that happen. But what we can do is begin to set ourselves free from the hostage situation that our emotions play on us, and
It's such a profound thing losing a child. I've never did that myself, but I lost a brother. I know my mother was never the same again, and it would have been wonderful for her to have met somebody like you that could have made her feel whole again, because I don't think she ever did, as a lot of people have lost children out there. So
yeah,
that's a wonderful story to share.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I do the easy stuff. She did all the hard work.
Oh, yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
and I'd love to say that it was stuff that I discovered, but I got this from my teachers. My
Yep.
teachers helped me, and all I'm doing is just passing on their knowledge onto other people. And I think that's what I think people these days trying to become doctors and professors of different stuff, trying to prove that they found a brand new way of doing stuff, when in fact all they're doing is just imparting thousands and thousands of years and probably millions and millions of people's knowledge. They're forgetting to honour it. It frustrates me sometimes that people don't honour a lot of the hard work that other people have done to get people in. Sorry, I just
Well,
but all the hard work was done by her.
yeah.
It's easy for me to go, look, do this, do that, have you thought about this? I don't actually say do this, do that. It's more the inquiry, what did you think about that? Or what did you think about that? Or have you looked at this and that sort of stuff? But all the hard work was done by her. She, it's an incredibly amazing lady and incredibly inspiring as a father of young children and a teenager, 18-year-old. I really related to the pain that she was feeling, and it's hard sometimes getting out of your own way when people talk to you about these types of things, because it is incredibly emotional, and trying to get your emotional brain out of the way.
But you gave her the support. And the thing is that a lot of people don't want to listen to it, or they don't want to hear about it, or they can only lend a hand so far because it's too close to home, and people, as you said before, they don't like to see other people suffer. So you were her support system, and you gave her the parameters to heal within, and that's a great gift. And you're right, this stuff has been going on for thousands of years. I remember I was 16 years old reading a book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse,
Oh,
which I
yeah.
highly recommend.
Yeah, I've got that book.
And yeah, do you? Okay, and that's when I first learned about the Buddha, and very helpful during my difficult hormonal teenage years. So anyway, but
It's
it's
amazing you picked up a book like that in your teenage years. I'm very jealous.
well, okay, well, yeah, I was going through lots of stuff. Anyway,
What made you think about Siddhartha? What was it that sort of, because I mean, even the cover of the book, it's not the most like appealing. It's not
mm,
striking in any way. It looks incredibly bland. It's amazing that you even thought about picking it up.
I started at a very young age. I was born into a really dysfunctional family. At a very young age, I asked myself, why? Why am I here? Why am I with this family? And there was some very difficult things going on at home during my teenage years. And I had read some other new age books, I guess you'd call them, that started making sense
Yeah.
for me about we're here to, as we are a soul in this physical body, here to learn lessons and learn about reincarnation. And I think I was in grade 11 English class, and we were asked to do a book report. And I just went to the library, and honestly, I feel like I was just directed to that book. I wasn't going, okay, I want to read something about Buddha. I didn't even know it was about Buddha. It just sounded like an interesting journey. I'll have to go back and reread the book cover because it must have been something in the description. And then I went, oh my goodness, it's about Buddha. I thought it was a
Mm.
story about a young boy. So
That's the
anyway,
wonderful thing about Buddha, is that he was just a normal young boy.
yeah,
The name
yeah.
Siddhartha in India, yes, he had a more wealthier family than most. But awesome that you're obviously quite intuitive even as far back as then.
Yeah, I think things just show up in your life for a reason. So it's one of my beliefs. So, what beliefs empower you?
What beliefs empower me? What I love most about humans is hope.
We're ever hopeful, aren't we?
We are
We
incredibly hopeful and
creatures.
skillful, and
Yeah.
I think with hope comes the opportunity for better days. And that's the thing that's incredibly inspiring about the human spirit, and when we begin to recognize, we are incredibly powerful, strong creatures. Yes, we see ourselves as being top of the food chain when in reality, I was even watching a little Sadhguru thing the other day from a mate of mine who posted it, where he was talking about, if the creator had created so intricately an ant, how intricate is an ant? In the same way he cares so much about that ant, he cares exactly the same way about us. How can we begin to feel like as if we're something greater than them? Why do we have this view that we should be at the top and the ants at the bottom? And it's that sort of the hope that people like yourself that just wanted to help people, show them a better life, a simpler life, a happier life, a more confident life, get clarity in their life. It's that hope that gets them to you. It's that hope that gets them to me. It's the hope that there's going to be a better day tomorrow, that they'll the hope that is what gets them to wake up in the morning. It's that.
Because there is hope, because you're right. I'm old enough now to know that if I'm going through something, I know that this too shall pass,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
it always does.
Yeah.
It's the yin and yang of life. The pendulum swings both ways. And so we can't know joy without knowing suffering, right? And
Yeah.
so it's just part of the balance. But it's great having people like you with the mind tools, if you will, that can guide people and make it a faster journey. And what you do works. And I know the tools that I use work because it worked for me.
Yeah. And it's good to have sort of, when you begin to realize, the yin and the yang of life, is that how could we know what good is if we didn't know what bad was? We could never grow. We could never learn if we were perfect creatures. Life would be completely unenjoyable. Everything would be mundane, the same. There'd be no colors that stand out. There's no colors that we enjoy more than others. There's no sounds. There's no anything that, there's got to be a sound that we hate to have a sound that's incredible, and when we begin to realize that this is life, that with the good there is bad, and that with the bad periods we can hope for a better day, and it gets us through that day, when we realize maybe tomorrow will be better. And then it continues to inspire us and motivate us to, as I said before, to seek support when life takes a bit of a dip.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I've come to the conclusion that perfection is a concept to make us feel bad about ourselves
Yeah.
because it's like a never attainable thing, right? And
Yeah.
we're always learning, and it's a process. Life is a process. We're not heading for an end game from my perspective anyway. So what values guide you, Dan?
Well, I've got 3 key values actually.
I suspect that compassion's one of them. I've heard you mention that word a lot.
Yeah, compassion is absolutely, it is the heart of everything that I do and we do as a company. So, yeah, compassion is one of them. Wisdom is another, and connection, or it's called collaboration. So, my 3 key values through my own practice, I've practiced a lot on discovering who I am, and there's a lot of self discovery when we start asking ourselves these difficult questions and really questioning our own beliefs. When we start asking, who am I? What came out of that question for me was this recognition that actually it's not about who I am, it's about who we are, that we're actually part of something so much bigger. There's something beyond this idea of me, and this I am is, again, this egotistical side that's trying to find out who I am, when really there is something huge and expansive, and that's where this idea of the collaboration comes on, that really that life, like you're doing with these podcasts and stuff like that life isn't supposed to be just about sitting in a monastery in the far hills and just exploring your own brain. And for those people, yes, maybe it is, but really I've been put in the middle of a town, with other humans to help collaborate with them to make this life enjoyable for everyone that's around us. And I'm not putting down those people that go and sit down. I couldn't imagine. I mean, my wife's biggest fear, if we all went pear-shaped, that's where I would be.
Okay. You're going to run off to it.
I would be
To
up in,
monasteries.
yeah, I'd be up in the hills somewhere just practicing meditation every single day because I absolutely love it as a practice, But collaboration, it's an integral part of being a human. We're part of a human race. We're not a human being. And even the idea of being means that we're taking part in something, So we're part of something so much bigger, and the collaboration is incredibly important because we need others. And compassion is, like I said, this idea, we've talked about it enough. And wisdom is what comes of it, like getting to know people like yourself and the wisdom I can take from speaking to you and my teachers and even my kids. My kids are amazing teachers. They're incredibly
Aren't they?
Yeah.
Observing children is such a powerful thing to do. They're so in the moment, and they don't have all the filters that we've acquired.
And that's an important part of the wisdom part too, is making sure that I'm not trying to impose Dan Ireland's beliefs on my children, that they empowering them to make their own decisions. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to get away with everything, but I want them to make choices. I want them to make decisions. I want them to get things wrong. I want them to fail and suck really bad at things and not mollycoddle them and prepare them for a world that unfortunately is imperfect, And I think they share their wisdom back at me because some of the stuff that they say to me is incredibly insightful. I look at my 12-year-old sometimes and I just think, what? Where?
But isn't that great that you're listening to that young voice and you can see or hear wisdom and recognize it, and that you're teaching them to think for themselves? Because as you know, so many patterns of behavior and beliefs passed down from generations. And, if I myself looked at my grandmother, my mother, and I just said, the buck stops here. I'm not doing that anymore. So anyway. So lastly, knowing everything that you do now, what message do you have for your younger self? Maybe that self that was bullied, what message would you have for that person?
I've done a lot of work, inner child work, and I don't think I would be where I am right now if I didn't have all those mistakes. And so I suppose the only thing I would say is that everything will be okay.
Yep. And you're right. And also, they weren't mistakes. I think that they're all lessons, right? And it certainly wasn't anything that you did that caused the bullying, but it spurred you on to become the amazing man that you are now. So there you go. Things happen for a reason.
They do. I hope so. They call it synchronicity, but whatever it is, it's another word, I think.
I love that word. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that word. We'll keep that in the podcast. Well, I'm going to say thank you very much. And thank you for joining me today and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I hope they take something positive away from it.
Please remember to subscribe and share across social media. I'd really appreciate that, as Awaken to the Best You is my way of giving back. The more, the merrier. And I'd also love to read your comments, so please send your feedback my way so I know how to help you the most. Thank you again. Ciao for now.